Out There Media Group presents Out There Radio, a weekly journey into the world of the occult, conspiracy theories, counterculture, and the bizarre undercurrents of the human psyche. It's Out There with your hosts, Raymond Wiley and Austin Gandy.
Welcome to the Out There Radio Twin Peaks special. I'm Austin Gandy.
And my name is Raymond Wiley. How you doing today, brother?
Very good. Very good.
New set.
Yeah. We've
Especially
spruced things up for the Red Room.
It's true. I was saying earlier today that this is more decoration than I do at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But this is an extra special event.
what the hell is Twin Peaks? Anyone under the age of 25 is saying right now.
True.
Austin, can you encapsulate this before we?
What is it and why are we talking about
Yes.
it? It is a 25
yeah.
or so years old television show that aired from 1990 to 91 and drew at the height of its popularity probably around 17 million to higher viewers. It's one of the most highly rated television shows in its class at the time. And it managed to really blow audiences' minds and critics alike because it looked a lot like a murder mystery combined with a soap opera. But it was easily one of the weirdest television shows ever made.
You know, you're a magician by trade,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not surprised that you are into this show as you are, because there are occult themes within its soap opera-like cheeseball episodes that seem to pop up. A couple of them that seem to pop up over and over again. We're going to talk about some of that tonight, and just sort of generally be total fanboys.
And we're going to spoil lots of things. So if you haven't watched it and want to,
Yeah, pause this, and we'll see you in 30 hours later, yeah.
and then come right back and we'll continue to talk about it. So it follows the investigation of the murder of one Laura Palmer, a
That's right.
high school girl from the town of Twin Peaks, Washington. And the investigation is being headed by more or less the protagonist of the show, FBI agent Dale Cooper, who's investigating it in cooperation with local sheriff Harry S. Truman, the bumbling Andy, the mysterious Native American deputy Hawk.
We're turning off the 25 and under crowd, Austin. We gotta describe this better.
It's true. And in the course of their investigations, they encounter various strange and quirky characters in the town of Twin Peaks who slowly over time are revealed to have many secrets of their own, just as the town does.
Yes, everyone seems to have a double life, which we'll talk about later. And the show itself is like a best in genre in a lot of ways, because it spins off a lot of other shows. Like there's the X-Files and Carnival, and even some elements of Lost coming out of this show. And these are all sort of conspiracy, occult-oriented shows that have long plot lines and stuff like that. But Twin Peaks is cheesier and yet better than all of those.
Right. Possibly due to the heavy involvement of David Lynch, one of the co-directors of the show, David Lynch and Mark Frost. Right?
Well, that's we're going to have like a top 10 list. Why we're talking about this, what we like about Twin Peaks, right? God, this donut is delicious. How's that coffee?
Black as a lake on a moonless night.
There you go. So, the first thing on our list of why we like Twin Peaks is David Lynch, who, if you're saying, what the hell are these guys talking about movies for? This is a conspiracy theory show. Remember that we started off reviewing movies, reviewing movies at WUOG.
Many moons ago.
Yes, so we never got to David Lynch, though, and I think today's a good day to talk about David Lynch, since we're talking about Twin Peaks. What are your favorite David Lynch movies?
I love Mulholland Drive. I
Oh
think
my
that's
God! I have the Hotch from Naomi Watts. Right?
she's amazing in that. The movie is equally. It takes some unexpected turns, right? Suddenly, the time stream of the narrative itself seems to kind of come into question.
And for all you like '90s goth kids out there, it's not unlike the film Lost Highway, which David Lynch made later. Marilyn Manson's in the snuff film.
It's true.
In the background of that movie.
Yeah, I remember.
Craziness. So
what does David Lynch do, though, with his movies? He's known for being very visually stunning. His fantastic cinematography, sound design is often,
sensuality,
strong visual language.
raw emotion, fear, love, powerful emotions on both ends of the spectrum, I feel like.
A certain amount of surrealism and symbolism in the work. But I think, especially the interplay between the mundane and the uncanny, or the remarkable, the occult, or the confusing, or the dreamlike. He plays with those two things a lot. I would actually characterize him as a great Americana director. We've got a few. I mean, we can kind of think of Woody Allen and John Waters and so on and so forth. People who are very obsessed with American identity as a thing in and of itself, as almost like a character in their pieces. And I think David Lynch takes a particularly odd angle with it, because it seems like there's no mockery. Like John Waters tends to have a very, tongue-in-cheek,
No, and
snarky
yet the
tone.
characters in Twin Peaks are cheesy, and yet mysterious somehow at the same time. I don't know how he captures that. Mulholland Drive, good example. There's a scene in Mulholland Drive where, like, this guy is talking to another guy in a diner, and the guy he's talking to is convinced that there's this like monster hiding out behind the dumpster out behind the restaurant, and like somehow the way he builds it up, even though it's the cheesiest circumstance to try to scare you in a movie, it's not like a horror movie or anything like that. I think it was one of my good friends was talking about how that just scared them more than anything else they'd ever seen in a film, and then 10 minutes later in Mulholland Drive will be like the sexiest makeout scene between like the characters, and it has a certain sexuality and sensuality to it that you just don't, that's different from other films and different from other filmmaking.
Yeah, I would say that what's remarkable about David Lynch's projects is they tend to be very sincere while looking like they're a send-up.
Yes, and what is good about Twin Peaks in a way is that he's got to work even harder to convey the sincerity, because he can't do things that are truly gruesome because he's on ABC in 1990 airing this. So, but a cult TV show, right? That's what it is more than anything else. We've talked about like shit like Star Trek and all that kind of stuff before, but this has an equal cult following.
But when you drop into the show, all you think you're watching is a crazy cop drama investigating the murder of Laura Palmer, and then you start to feel like, well, okay, these characters have all these insane connections between them, and the various suspects that are investigated, are all enmeshed with each other, and so on and so forth. And then there's this additional element that you're talking about, this like deeply symbolic core of it.
Yeah, and in my reaction to it was more that I was watching a soap opera. And then I was like, man, this is kind of cheesy. I've heard this is good. And then as I got into it a little bit more, certain things would happen that would never happen in a soap opera, that would never happen in a crime drama or whatever. And they were just, you wouldn't even ever expect to see some of this stuff on film. Like,
at all.
Yeah, the way the characters interact with each other and all this. But, God, we're such rambling fanboys about this, I mean... So where are we? We've talked about David Lynch.
And we're talking about subverting Americana and the fact that, the town itself is kind of, it's got all these visual elements that show up again and again. It's stoplights and diners and the cars and the various locales themselves are kind of, iconic. They kind of stick in your mind in a way that a lot of the locations in other TV shows don't. There's the Sawmill, and there's the Great Northern Hotel. It's very distinctive. You can actually go and stay there. It's apparently really quite nice.
Is Twin Peaks a real place?
No.
It's not a real place. So it's just some random hotel in Washington State somewhere.
Yeah. I think there's a Twin Peaks, Ohio. But...
So, What else do we have on the list?
So let's talk about the characters. Why these characters are some of the best characters television has ever seen. And part of it is just the varied and fantastic cast. And some of them are just so distinctive, it's stunning. Like the Log Lady.
The Log Lady.
Mm-hmm.
She's represented on the set today. What do you think about the Log Lady?
Right, so there's a character who appears at various points and delivers a mysterious message by way of her log, which she carries around and treats as if it is a living, talking character. But one doesn't necessarily have any clear idea of what she does. Now, anybody who's actually watched Twin Peaks on Netflix or what have you is missing out on an element that was added in later on, which was the intro to every show, started by the Log Lady. She would give a little poem or summary of the upcoming show.
So there are elements to the mystery that you're not even getting.
You might not have even seen yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's David Duchovny in drag.
Love that. And he's playing an FBI agent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's foreshadowing his appearance on X-Files. And how many... I think there are 12 actors in Twin Peaks that appear on X-Files episodes.
I think that's true.
I've been going back to the first couple of seasons, and it's just over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Scully's dad is the Major.
The Major. That's one of your favorite characters.
My very favorite character in the show, who works for some sort of classified branch of the Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
and...
They're studying alien transmissions up in the secluded rural town of Twin Peaks. Right?
He's also the member of a secret society,
Mm-hmm.
the Bunkhouse Boys. Oh, am I
The
spoiling? The Bookhouse Boys. Am I spoiling too much?
I mean, we gave the warning.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So, and he gives the awesomest monologues I've ever heard on a television show.
That are so heartfelt and, I don't know, deep. It's dropping a rather large anvil of, kind of a moral message, but it's so moving because you don't see that kind of that kind of sincerity from a character in a television show.
It's the emotional range of it
Mm-hmm.
that I think really gets to a lot of people. The transference between absurdity on the one hand and utter sincerity on the other hand at different points of it. How it played so well in 1991 to ABC's audience in 1991, I'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But
Other characters that are great. So the protagonist, Dale Cooper,
he's your spirit animal.
I think that he is a fantastic role model for anybody because he comes on the scene being sent to investigate this murder by the FBI, and at first you don't have a sense that he's anything more. He just he looks like a typical FBI suit, right? But very quickly you discover that he's charming and almost naive in his sincerity, and he is in love with basic pleasures and seems to have no sense of duplicity at all. He's completely open and honest with everybody he deals with. And the cast on the show, the characters themselves seem to, gravitate towards him in a way because of his deep optimism.
The fact that they trust him as much as he'll work on the case by interpreting dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about him as a role model for yourself. Also, I make that flippant joke, he's your spirit animal, but I see so much of that, like, good-naturedness in your crazy occult journeys and some of the things that you do. So, I'm not trying to butter you up too much on the air here.
But, I mean, what is so interesting about this character, like, he comes onto the scene to investigate something, but he's not a deductive Sherlock Holmes kind of character who's going to accomplish what he's there to do by, analysis and critical thought or anything like that. He's there and uses intuition and trust and openness.
And the Tibetan method.
And some very strange intuitive methods of police work. But I think the thing that's so stunning about him is that of the many characters on the show that have double lives, his internal self and his external self as they're projected are very much in tune with each other. He's a very whole being that's presented on the show. He's competent, optimistic. He doesn't have any anti-hero flaws like you see so often on television or in movies these days, where to give a character depth, you give them some kind of dark aspect. He has almost none.
And that is why his fall at the end of the series is so rattling to you. And why the open-ended nature of the series is so rattling to you, which we'll get to in a minute. I want to talk about a few more characters. But he doesn't have you're right, he doesn't have the sense of an anti-hero. Yet, by the end of the series, he becomes Bob, who we have to talk about. Who is Bob? What is Bob?
What is Bob?
What is Bob? We're not talking about J.R. Bob Dobbs, who's our avatar of Slack.
Right.
No.
No. We're talking about the central antagonistic force in the show of Twin Peaks. And it's not even clear by the end of the show what Bob is, or if Bob is real in any fundamental ontological sense. It's totally ambiguous what the spiritual forces that are at work in Twin Peaks are, but it's clear that they're dark, that they're old, and that they're pervasive, and can have direct influence in people's lives.
Definitely. All right, well, we're coming down to the end of the segment, right? And let's pick up this conversation about Bob when we get back from the break. We're back out there, Twin Peaks special, right? What a rambling segment. Good Lord. Well, I've had more donuts, had more beer. You know, I'm feeling a little leveled off now, Austin.
Good.
And I think we can try to zone in on what it is about this show that would make someone who likes something like Out There make it influential to them.
Yeah.
In much the same way, you know, because we've talked about, like, In Search of, Unsolved Mysteries, and shows like this before. We've made fun of Alex Jones, and they're, you know, all these shows, yeah, they're right in genre. But Twin Peaks is in genre in a almost better way than any of those things, because it presents the concept of mystery and you're right, and the mundaneness of life together. And the characters charm the pants off of you, charm the crap out of you. Audrey Horne. Most beautiful early 90s, 50s style thing I've ever seen. Great.
Yeah.
But Bob. That's what we were on before.
Right. And this is, I think, a good way to kind of segue into why we can find it interesting from a perspective of, you know, occult or spiritual or investigating reality kind of ways. Because there are these segments that show up in the show that suddenly depart into an area that is very hard to convey in words what is going on. It's so, you know, suffused with symbolism and these figures whose purpose or motives or identities even are unclear, including Bob, the one-armed man, the dwarf in the red room who speaks backwards. You know, these moments where you're not clear what is happening on screen.
And you start to wonder if it's not... Well, like with all David Lynch's work, you wonder if it's not just meant to confuse and piss you off.
Right.
But at the same time, when you really drill down into it and you start getting a little over obsessed with it, you start to wonder, is this a spell? Is this... Are these crazy movements and like all these weird scenes that I'm seeing set up in these films, like, are they meant to convey something subconsciously to me?
On some nonverbal level.
I want to take us down for just a minute down a slightly different road.
Sure.
And I think you'll be able to speak to this more than me. The films of Kenneth Anger.
Yeah.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about Kenneth Anger and just your experience with his films and how they are magical by nature?
Sure, yeah.
And how a film can be a spell. A film can be a magical thing.
Yeah, and that's the concept of using media as a way to project an occult or a magic effect is something that, you know, comes up in later works by Alan Moore or Grant Morrison or so on and so forth. But yeah, Kenneth Anger was deeply influenced by Aleister Crowley and made a couple films, including Lucifer Rising and the inauguration of the Pleasure Dome. And these films used explicit occult imagery, particularly, you know, Egyptian in Lucifer Rising, or the accoutrement of, you know, ritual magic, ceremonial magic, to weave together kind of a symbolist kind of narrative about, some dawning of a new aeon or awakening of spiritual forces. And Kenneth Anger, similarly, I'd say to Lynch, uses or weaves in elements of kitsch, I would say, to kind of, indicate, or maybe to even ground the high-minded mysticism of the work into something kind of recognizable, including, some of Kenneth Anger's films are notable for having, hot studs cleaning a hot rod or something, and you're like, you're weaving an occult symbol set into the procedure of just some, sexy,
appealing to my emotional nature,
right?
Which Lynch does the same thing. Like, it's hypersexualized, or it's hyper repulsive, one or the other. And it's weird, like I was saying earlier, how he was able to achieve that without an R rating.
Yeah,
in the early '90s, So,
and I would say that this sort of presentation of mystical or occult things are far closer to the reality of experience that practitioners of mysticism, or even simple meditation, or people who are very interested in investigating their own dreams or pursuing lucid dreaming or anything like that. That's the kind of experience that you have when you suddenly start to have experiences of communications with what may or may not be beings from another dimension or from your own subconscious bubbling up. They tend to, produce.
Have you ever had a cheesy supernatural experience?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. But and often it's frustratingly ambiguous what the point of it was, what it was trying to communicate to you. Sometimes I've had numerous what I think were precognitive dreams about very mundane events or conversations. But when that moment of recognition occurs, where you're like, I know I've dreamed this.
It was profound still.
It seems deeply important, and there's this sense that you're grasping at something that's sliding away from your mind. Why did I dream about this? What did it mean that I knew that this was about to happen? And suddenly a totally mundane conversation or a walk down the street can become part of some, deeper existential question that you have. Like, what is reality? What is my position relative to it?
And here we have filmmakers trying to mimic that style, mimic that cheeseball, profound, at the same time emotional experience, which is not sexy in a lot of ways. It's not a good story. It's not clickbait like Nikola Tesla, right, or whatever. Hey, would you like some more coffee?
I would love some more coffee.
That deep black Joe. There you go.
Thank you. So yeah, there seems to be an element here where a viewer who is going into it expecting a simple soap opera or murder mystery suddenly finds themselves, hitting a wall of symbolist mystical language that is not something you can pick apart with your analytical mind.
Right. Okay, and if you're super smart, nerdy out there viewer, right? You know that the trick's being played on you. But if you were watching Dallas or some soap opera, and then you got into Twin Peaks because of those elements, you're like perfect fodder for manipulation by a master magician like David Lynch, right?
Yeah, he's brought down your defenses and suddenly wallops you with a bizarre sequence of conflicting images and people speaking backwards at you.
Can you imagine like Alan Peggy Bundy sitting watching David Lynch sitting watching Twin Peaks, like all this stuff going on underneath, this spell, this magic being worked on? Like, how does somebody like that? How does a 60-year-old woman in hair rollers in 1990 react to the Black Lodge scene
right
at the end of Twin Peaks, where there's obviously all this magical imagery, hyper-emotional engagement with the audience? All right, what do you think of in the Black Lodge? The floor, this sort of subversion of Freemasonic black-white imagery, Kabbalistic imagery, but in this weird zigzag pattern. It's like It's meant to say there's something magical going on here.
Sure, yeah, and it's part of the visual language of the show itself is black and white and red, tend to be these colors that show up in various ways. And if you go back for your 16th or 17th viewing of the show, you see the black and white imagery. Those are two colors that are easy to throw into mini scenes, but what would you call it? The logo of the high school is a zigzag, Twin Peaks,
okay.
Twin Peaks High. Audrey Horne's sweater in the first scene that you see her is a zigzag of white and black.
And her 50s shoes.
Yeah.
Those little black and white.
Leather, yeah, black and white shoes. So that's an easy color to weave in, but I think it brings up, there's kind of a Gnostic element at play in Twin Peaks, because there's the antagonistic evil spirit Bob, and this other figure, Michael, the one-armed man, who seems to be his opposite, but they appear to be in conflict with each other. There's the Black Lodge, there's the White Lodge, these secret societies that seem to go back before the time of Twin Peaks itself. And so there's obviously kind of a polar idea of, within the show itself, there are two forces at war, black and white.
And then once again, with that dichotomy, it's another example of David Lynch making it harder on you and making it more open-ended at the end, because the one-armed man does not come and save Agent Cooper in the Black Lodge. He apparently cannot enter the Black Lodge. And therefore, our very human characters, our very mundane human characters that are so enthusiastic, are in the end faced with a spiritual darkness and a trap, as it were, that is far beyond even their good natures.
Yeah, and it's beyond our ability to even conceive or make a story that makes much sense about what the Black Lodge even is, that we see these characters stumble into. It's so beyond their or our ability to make sense of, that you get that sinking feeling of, they are truly lost. I can't even describe the peril that they're in.
Now, but you watch it and you think, oh, Lynch is intentionally trying to confuse me. I can't work this out. But if you watch it a couple of times, you absolutely can work it out. And by the end, by the time you've seen it a few times, you can tell exactly what's happening to these characters who have spent a whole 30 episodes, 30 hours with you in the mundane town of Twin Peaks, and suddenly they are in a hell of sorts. And it's very fascinating.
Yeah, but getting back to the black and white imagery, that kind of comes back to this idea that every character in the show has a double life.
Yes.
Right? There's an inside and an outside that's, the inner core and the outer core that's projected. And the outer one looks very white, very innocent, very, almost predictable. Like the characters that appear are such recognizable archetypes, some of them. The Log Lady and other characters like that are kind of, curveballs, but the teenagers, the friends of Laura Palmer, who are kind of doing their own side investigation while they're all tangled up in their ridiculous emotional interstruggles.
Not only do they have double lives, but for most of the characters, you either see their parents or their children.
True.
So it's almost like a quadruple life, because the Major has a double life, and then his son, James? Bobby. Good job, Austin. Bobby has a double life, and then the wife might have a double life, and then Bobby's girlfriend might have a double life, and then Bobby's girlfriend's got another boyfriend, and he's got a double life, and it's just all the way around. And it's so weird how it's like, if you like soap operas, which I don't at all, I can see how you would just eat this up and be able to watch it week after week, and how it brought this. It was like bringing the audience that would 2 years later be watching The X-Files together with the audience that was watching Who Shot JR, like into the same cohort. But I guess that's what we were just describing with this dichotomy.
Yeah.
So,
and the double life that's at the center of the mystery, it actually ceases to be, after a certain point, who killed Laura Palmer, and instead is who was Laura Palmer, right? She's the most
But this was a
dualistic of
narrative
all.
choice that was put in from above. And this is one of those things where you can almost all of your favorite sci-fi, fantasy, occult, conspiracy theory shows you've ever seen, if they work in fiction, have almost always been canceled or changed in midstream. And that was the way it was with, oh God, have you ever seen the last episode of Star Trek Voyager? No, Star Trek Enterprise. That's what it was. The last episode of Star Trek Enterprise. It is the biggest cop-out you've ever seen. And for a lot of people, the last half of the second season of Twin Peaks is much the same experience, where ABC forced David Lynch, forced him to solve the case.
Right. The murderer was revealed halfway through the second season, and all of a sudden, in an attempt to boost the ratings back up to their former glory, and then all of a sudden the cat's out of the bag, and a bunch of new, some of them very pointless plot lines kind of spin out of it, only to come back around by the end of the season. I'd say the last few episodes are really strong again, and then you're left with an incredible cliffhanger that is not resolved in the subsequent prequel movie.
Fire Walk With Me, a strange film, not covering a lot of the plot or characters in the original series, and yet full of famous actors like Kiefer Sutherland. Chris Isaac plays the Agent Cooper, plays a character like Agent Cooper. Do you like his albums in the 90s, Chris Isaac?
Yeah.
I would watch the video just because of, bodies.
Heart-shaped world, or...
I Want to Fall in Love with You. Yeah. Anyway, God, we just, A, dating ourselves, B, showing that we might have been listening to really bad songs on the radio. So, anyway, we'll be back after the break and try to wrap this up.
Yeah.
I still think that the people under 25 listening to this are just going to be like, what the hell are you guys doing?
We gotta catch them.
We're going to get you.
Okay.
Or Netflix is probably going to get you, actually.
We'll be right back.
We'll be back. Austin, look at this delicious pie.
So much pie.
3 each, Cooper! Yeah, it was cool that David Lynch got to play a part in his own super awesome show. He's like the Walter Skinner of the show, but way funnier.
Way funnier. Yeah. And it's revealed in the course of Fire Walk With Me, right? That the...
This pie
damn
is so good, man.
So it's revealed in Fire Walk With Me that the investigation of Laura Palmer falls under a class of investigation that the FBI covers called Blue Rose cases, right?
Kind of like X-Files.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's kind of a precursor to that, right? So many shows owe such big debts to Twin Peaks that it's pretty remarkable, actually.
This pie is remarkable. I'm just saying, don't expect me to have something to say right now.
Okay.
Keep talking.
So let's talk about the occult rituals, right? So various points in the show, Dale Cooper either is drawn into a vision or some kind of transformative sequence, or he initiates one himself. There's a particular moment where they're attempting to summon a spirit, right, in the bar, and they, resort explicitly to a magical ritual to summon the ghost.
Yeah, and he, what's that movie, Ghoulies? It's remarkably similar to the film Ghoulies, where the guy draws the magical circle on the floor.
Yeah.
So what do you think the meaning of all of this? What I want to know is David Lynch trying to do something to me? Because whenever I watch his films, whenever I see his shows, I feel like, that was cool, but the joke's on me somehow. Like, I'm going to come out of this 20 years later, liking a certain kind of cheese or something, or just with some weird habit that I didn't have before, and it will be this, thing, implanted by artistic mind control.
Until David Lynch, says the trigger word.
Is that what this 25 years thing is all about? Because we haven't talked about that yet, right? Why do we even get back around to Twin Peaks? Not just because it's on Netflix, but because if there were to be a sequel to Twin Peaks,
it would be right now.
It would be right now.
Yeah, and this is something that people fans of the show can't let go. the idea that maybe it'll come back. And it's embedded in the very last episode, right? Dale Cooper, in the course of his investigations, has finally tracked down the lair of Bob, this insane, murderous spirit. And it's in this pool of water in the middle of a sycamore grove or something, up in the mountains. And he enters through this red curtain that appears when the stars are aligned or what have you, and he enters into this lair and becomes trapped in a corridor that loops on itself in the way that fever dreams do.
Yes.
And at one point, the spirit of Laura Palmer appears, ostensibly stolen by Killer Bob, and trapped in the Black Lodge, and says, "I'll see you in 25 years." Mm-hmm. It's just right there, last episode. We'll be back in 25 years.
And then remember, I think it's earlier in the series, you see a vision of Agent Cooper sitting in this armchair in the Black Lodge, in the waiting room, as an older man.
Yeah.
And his hair is white, his skin is more wrinkled, and he looks tired, like he's been just sitting there in this chair for 25 years. Mm-hmm. Question is will David Lynch, Kyle MacLachlan, and all these other actors who we haven't seen since 1993, we're going to get them all back together?
No, we won't have Pete Martell. He died, I think, the next year.
Yes.
After making Little Witches.
Oh,
just the worst movie ever heard.
You had to watch it, though, because it was about occult themes.
Yeah, I thought it was, well, it promised to be another The Craft. And once you've watched The Craft 300 times, you want more.
I want Twin Peaks more than I want The Craft.
It was a time. It spoke to me deeply.
It was a time. They were the 90s.
We have to cut ourselves some slack for the 90s.
Yeah. But somehow, okay. So speaking of that, let's talk about how Twin Peaks is timeless, right? At the same time that it is dated. Because we're talking about how we feel like 90s dinosaurs, even sitting here talking about this for 45 minutes.
Sure.
How is it timeless?
How is it timeless? So the characters, the location, they become instantly archetypal, right? As soon as you meet some of the characters, you're sold on them. Some of them you have to warm up to for a while as they reveal their essences, and some take weird random turns that you wind up forgetting about until you watch the show again, and you remember that Benjamin Horn, the father of one of the other high school girls, goes completely insane and becomes a Confederate soldier for like 8 episodes.
Yeah, he reenacts the Battle of Gettysburg in his office with little men, and they have to, and then Dr. Jacoby, right, encourages the family to play into his fantasy so he can come out of it. And so at the end of his whole fugue, or whatever you want to call it, like they have this surrender at Appomattox ceremony. Completely ridiculous. And just like everything else in the show, you're like, how did this get on mainstream TV?
Who signed off on this? Yeah. So there are elements that are surprising, but also elements that are very enduring. Characters that don't seem dated or out of place. They seem like someone that you could encounter in a strange small town and have a unique experience with. So this is something that I wanted to talk about. The mysterious things that can happen to somebody who really gets into this show. I watched all of Twin Peaks in like through, I don't know, week-long period maybe, a few years ago, and I had become so saturated in its imagery that when I went to Minneapolis, St. Paul, nowhere near
Twin Peaks,
Washington, I saw a nightclub called Palmer's. I went to a bookstore called the Book House. I stayed at a Best Western called the Great Northern. And as I was leaving town, I stopped at a gas station and saw Nadine, the one-eyed, red-headed creator of the Silent Drape Runners.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, spitting image, eye patch and everything, walking out of the convenience store as I was pumping gas, and it took everything I had to control myself to not just come up to her and ask for a photograph, because that would have been probably completely
Should have
unacceptable.
been like, oh, what are you into eye patch girls now? That would have been so terrible.
Yeah, but you start
okay.
to see owls everywhere.
Were you owls? The owls are not what they seem.
Mm-hmm.
Were you Agent Cooper then? Were you channeling your spirit animal, Agent Cooper?
Right, one hopes so. One always aspires to.
I aspire Log Lady.
Log Lady.
Log Lady.
Mhm.
Yes. So in the remake, that's where I'm gonna be like really concentrating my audition piece is for Log Lady. So, but I think you got it wrapped up with this get up here.
Well, thank you.
So
let's talk
Wait, no. Let's talk about why you're not eating your damn pie over here.
I hate to eat on camera. I can't. These are props. These are
No,
pure visual
my
effect.
ass.
You're taking care of it.
I'm working on it.
So let's talk about the purpose of the rituals as expressed at the end of the show, middle of the show, and very beginning, right? There are these sequences that are strange and otherworldly and dreamlike and seem to speak in like a twilight language, almost like the language of alchemy or something.
Are we talking about 3 degrees?
You could think of them as sequential degrees of initiation, yes, and they reveal specific things to Agent Cooper at each point, right? You'll meet me again, Laura Palmer says in the first one, right before her cousin comes into town. And then in the second one, I think he's given a message by the giant after he's been shot in the stomach that reveals 3 things to watch out for, so he'll know that the giant is telling the truth. And then at the end, it's the trap is kind of, laid and sprung on Agent Cooper and he's captured. But what happens when he's captured at the end? A doppelganger appears, a double. And that's been something that's come up over and over again in the show. People have double lives of their own. People can become inhabited by this other being, and suddenly they are not themselves. Either intentionally or at the agency of another being, they are not themselves. And Agent Cooper at the end suddenly is divided himself, and his doppelganger appears and takes over his body, and that's where we're left at the end of the show, wondering if Dale Cooper's spirit will ever flee the Black Lodge.
Thanks, ABC.
Right.
Thanks, Obama, canceling Twin Peaks. He wasn't even president yet.
Was he even born?
He's not that young.
Little Barry.
Okay, are you ready for this?
Uh-huh.
My dad, he says he has a hard time trusting Obama because he doesn't trust anybody that doesn't wear a wristwatch.
Oh.
So, like, if you're young enough to, like, use your cell phone for your watch, the baby boomers are all suspicious of you, apparently, now.
Noted.
Thanks, ABC, canceling the show, like Fox canceled Firefly and all those other good shows.
Right. And yet, thank you for canceling it.
Yeah, because it could have gone the way of Star Trek Enterprise.
Or Lost, or various other shows that actually, Battlestar Galactica. I mean, we're going to get hate mail for various of these because some people really liked the way they wrapped up. But sometimes when a story comes to its conclusion, you realize that the writers either didn't know what they were doing all along, as in the case of Lost, or they spun out of control, they had too many plot elements coming in, they couldn't weave it back together, or it just falls apart for one reason or another.
That almost happened to the show The Venture Brothers. Are you familiar with this animated series?
Sure.
Where it just got so overblown, and then Doc Hammer has zeroed it in.
Trimmed all the fat.
Trimmed the fat, zeroed the plot in, and it looks really good. And I guess I will say that for Twin Peaks is that though they made it end early, the Black Lodge scene, the Black Lodge ritual, right? Watch out. You might want to throw some holy water on before you watch that one. But that stands as a singular piece of television. You would see that in an art film, not on ABC on 9 o'clock on Thursday night.
Yeah, and the question remains, either having seen it 25 years ago or seeing it now, what does that mean? What happens to the characters afterwards? What does it mean about, what is David Lynch trying to tell us about reality, about dreams, about how we know things? Those questions are unanswered, and in a certain sense, I think the show goes from being great to timeless, because we do not have a clear answer. He never just delivers it up on the plate at the, in the final scene.
Well, we've got a few minutes left in our Twin Peaks special. Perhaps you would speculate for us a little more about this path to on film initiation that you might be going through as you watch this show unfold.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you talked about how you seemed like there were a number of rituals culminating in what we see in the Black Lodge in these last, it's like 18 minutes of the last episode, 20 minutes of the last episode. Remember how I said earlier that the joke's on you? And let me tell you, the joke's going to be on me tomorrow because I'll have diabetes. But remember how I said you kind of feel like the joke's on you with David Lynch? Well, what has he done to us?
Right.
That's what I'm getting at. What has he done to us?
So I think coming back to David Lynch himself is kind of, interesting. Apparently he had a vision about the Red Room scene, one of the first, surreal sequences that kind of was part of the creative process of putting together Twin Peaks itself. He was walking out of his home and walking over to his car, and he put his hands on the hood of his car, and it was a hot summer day, and he suddenly had that vision of the Red Room and two figures talking to each other backwards or what have you, this dreamlike imagery. And somehow that, not the murder mystery or the characters or whatever, this dreamlike sequence became strong enough for him that he wanted to make a show around it. Right, and David
so it starts with the ritual itself. It starts with where the rubber hits the road and grows from there.
Yeah, and this mystical twilight kind of thing that doesn't even have a discrete meaning. So, as we know, David Lynch is big into transcendental meditation, the movement, right? And this was started I think it kind of got big in the 50s, and it was started in India by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And it was one of the first big pushes towards meditation and yoga as a fad practice.
The Beatles visited him, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Please go on.
Ravi Shankar was a devotee of the yogi, the Maharishi. So this movement itself is, ample material for a whole show because it kind of rides an interesting line between cult and not cult. But its fundamental message is that beyond words and language, if you silence your mind, you can enter into these states of consciousness that are mystical and transformative. And David Lynch has set up meditation centers all over the U.S. He's got a nonprofit that supports the teaching of transcendental meditation to kind of push people out of their habitual thought and into this weird other world that he seems content to occupy.
Well, I mean, I think in closing we would say, give his films a try. They'll give you that transcendental push, perhaps, in a way that the latest Hollywood blockbuster might not. So, any final thoughts?
I think we're good.
Have you enjoyed the Out There Twin Peaks special? We'll see you next week.
You have been listening to Out There Radio. For more information or to access premium episodes, please visit us online at outthereradio.net.